There's a root cause that mainstream psychology often overlooks, a root cause that explains why millions grow up incapable of true love, incapable of genuine feeling, incapable of truly living. And this root cause, it's not where you think it is. It's not in genetics. It's not in some brain defect. It's not in poor moral choices. The true root of narcissism is buried in something that happens in the very early years of life. Something so subtle it goes unnoticed, something so common it seems normal, something so painful the mind prefers to forget it entirely. Carl Jung dedicated years investigating this root cause, and what he discovered shattered everything psychology thought it knew about personality. But before I reveal this discovery, I need to warn you. What you're about to hear in the next few minutes could permanently change how you view your own childhood. It could bring back memories that were buried deep. It could awaken emotions you didn't even know you possessed. This isn't entertainment. This is psychological archaeology. So take a deep breath and let's descend to the root. The first mistake most people make is thinking narcissism is simply selfishness, that the narcissist is someone who chose to love themselves too much, who decided to place themselves above everyone else. This couldn't be further from the truth. The narcissist doesn't love themselves too much. The narcissist doesn't love themselves at all. What they love is an image, a construction, a mask they mistake for their own face. And this confusion doesn't begin in adulthood. It doesn't begin in adolescence. It begins much, much earlier. It begins when the child doesn't yet have the words to describe what's happening. Jung identified that the first 3 years of life are absolutely critical for the formation of identity. And during these 3 years, something can go terribly wrong. Let me explain exactly what happens. A child is born in a state of total fusion. They don't know they're a separate person. They don't know where they end and where the world begins. They don't know something called the self even exists. And that's normal. That's how we all begin. The job of those first few years is precisely to create that separation, to build the notion of a self, of an identity, of a me that's different from the world around. But how does this construction happen? Through mirroring. The child looks into the mother's eyes, and in the mother's eyes, they need to find themselves. They need to see their own existence reflected. They need to receive confirmation that they are real, that they are valid, that they deserve to exist. When the mother looks at the child with genuine love, with real presence, with unconditional acceptance, something magical happens. The child begins to internalize this validation, begins to build within themselves the notion that they are worthwhile, that they are worthy of love, that they can trust themselves. This is the birth of the true self, the authentic core of the person, the part that knows who they are, regardless of what others think. But what happens when the mirroring fails? What happens when the mother looks at the child and doesn't see the child? What if what she sees is a burden, an obligation, an extension of herself, a threat? This is exactly where the root of narcissism is planted. Jung described this process with disturbing precision. He showed that when mirroring fails systematically, the child enters an existential crisis, a crisis they don't have the capacity to process consciously. So they process it unconsciously, and the result of this crisis is a split, a shattering. The child divides themselves into 2 parts. One part goes into the shadow, is buried, forgotten, denied. This is the part that was rejected, that didn't receive mirroring, that learned it's not acceptable. The other part takes control. This is the part that works, that gets some acceptance, that learns to perform to obtain validation. Jung called this the false self, or the inflated persona. And here's the crucial point. The child doesn't know this division happened. They're not aware that part of them was buried. They don't realize that what they believe themselves to be is just a survival construct. For the child, and later for the adult they become, the false self is all that exists. It's the only known identity. It's the only way to be. This is the root of narcissism, not an excess of self-love, but a total absence of a true self, an identity built on emptiness, a mask that doesn't know it's a mask. Let me give you a concrete example, because maybe this still seems too abstract. A 2-year-old boy is playing on the floor. He's discovering the world, fascinated, curious. He finds a dried leaf and wants to show it to his mom. He runs to her, holding the leaf as if it were a treasure. The mother is on her cell phone, worried about work, about bills, about a million things. She doesn't even look at her son, or worse, she looks at him with irritation and tells him to stop interrupting her. In that moment, something breaks inside the boy. It's not dramatic, it's not violent, it's subtle, silent, invisible. But what happened? The child brought his true self, his genuine curiosity, his authentic joy, and he found rejection. He found invalidation. He found the message that what he is not welcome. If this happens once, the child recovers, but if it happens systematically, day after day, month after month, something permanent changes. The child learns that showing the true self is dangerous, that being authentic causes rejection, that to maintain the connection with the mother, he needs to hide who he really is. And then the split begins. The true self goes into the shadow, and the false self takes over. This boy might grow up to be a successful executive, an admired leader, someone who seems to have it all. But inside, there's an emptiness, a hole where the connection to himself should be, and all the wealth in the world can't fill it. But wait, because the story gets even more complex. There are different types of failures in mirroring, and each type creates a different form of narcissism. The first form is absent mirroring. The mother is there physically, but not emotionally. She takes care of the basic needs, feeds, changes diapers, but there's no emotional connection, no eye contact, no real presence. The child who grows up with absent mirroring develops what Jung called narcissistic hunger, a chronic emptiness, an insatiable need for attention, for validation, for confirmation that they exist. This person will spend their life trying to fill a hole that can't be filled from the outside. They will seek admiration, power, success, relationships, all in the hope of finally feeling real. But nothing works, because the hole is internal and can only be filled from within. The second form is distorted mirroring. The mother looks at the child, but what she sees is not the child. What she sees are her own projections, her own desires, her own wounds. A child who grows up with distorted mirroring never learns who they really are. They learn who their mother wants them to be. And they mold themselves to those expectations. They contort themselves to fit into a shape that isn't theirs. They suppress everything that isn't acceptable. They amplify everything that receives approval. The result is a person who has no idea who they are, who lives the lives of others, who changes personalities depending on who they're in front of, who can't answer the most basic question: what do you want? The third form is conditional mirroring. The mother offers love and validation, but only when the child behaves in a certain way, only when they meet expectations, only when they perform adequately. This type of mirroring is particularly insidious because it seems like love. The child receives attention, receives affection, but it's all transactional. It all depends on performance. The child who grows up with conditional mirroring develops what we can call performance narcissism. They learn that they're only worth something when they achieve, when they accomplish, when they impress. They become addicted to success, to recognition, to being the best. But beneath all that achievement, there's terror. Terror of failing. Terror of being discovered as insufficient. Terror that if they stop performing, they'll lose all love, all value, all reason to exist. The fourth form is inverted mirroring. The mother doesn't look at the child to validate the child. She looks at the child expecting to be validated by them. The relationship inverts. The child becomes the mother's mother. This is what happens when the mother is herself a narcissist, when she has her own unhealed wounds, when she uses the child as a source of narcissistic supply. The child who grows up with inverted mirroring develops what we can call codependent narcissism. They learn that their function in the world is to take care of others, validate others, serve others. Their own existence only makes sense in relation to someone who needs them. They'll attract grandiose narcissists like magnets. They'll enter into abusive relationships repeatedly. They'll sacrifice themselves until there's nothing left. Because deep down, they believe that's how love works. That's how they earn the right to exist. All these four forms have the same root cause: failure in primary mirroring, absence of unconditional validation in the early years of life, impossibility of building a solid true self. And they all result in the same basic pattern: a person who lives from the outside in, who depends desperately on the gaze of others to feel real, who can't access an internal source of self-worth. That's narcissism in its deepest essence. There's also a fifth form that deserves special attention: ambivalent mirroring. In this case, the mother oscillates. Sometimes she's present, loving, connected. Sometimes she disappears emotionally or becomes cold or hostile. The child never knows which mother they're going to find. This unpredictability is particularly damaging because the child can't develop a stable model of what a relationship is, what love is, what they can expect. They grow up hypervigilant, always analyzing the other person's mood, always trying to predict changes, always in a state of alert. And they develop what we can call anxious narcissism, a form that combines desperate hunger for validation with paralyzing fear of abandonment. They want intimacy desperately, but also have terror of intimacy, because intimacy means vulnerability, and vulnerability means risk of being abandoned. This type of narcissist is the one who suffers the most visibly. The other types manage to maintain more stable facades, but the anxious narcissist lives in constant emotional turbulence, highs and lows, idealizations and devaluations, clinging and pushing away. An exhausting cycle that destroys relationships and wears down the person themselves. Now let me show you something that few psychologists discuss: the role of the father. Most of the literature on child development focuses on the mother, and that makes sense. The mother is typically the primary attachment figure, the first source of mirroring. But Carl Jung went further. He showed that the father has a crucial role that's different but equally important. If the mother represents the mirroring of being, the father represents the mirroring of doing. If the mother validates who the child is, the father validates what the child can accomplish in the world. When the father is present and engaged, when he offers guidance and encouragement, when he celebrates the child's efforts, something important happens. The child develops confidence in their ability to act in the world, to achieve, to conquer. But when the father is absent, or worse, when he's present but critical, when nothing is good enough, when every effort is ridiculed or ignored, the child develops what Carl Jung called the paternal imposter complex. They never feel capable, never feel up to par. never believe they deserve their own achievements. And this combines with the wounds of maternal mirroring to create even more complex forms of narcissism. The classic grandiose narcissist, for example, frequently had distorted maternal mirroring but absent paternal involvement. They learned from the mother that they need to be special, but never had from the father the confirmation that they can realize that specialness in the world. So they compensate, inflate, exaggerate, create an image of success that doesn't correspond to internal reality. The covert narcissist, on the other hand, frequently had the inverse pattern. Absent maternal mirroring but critical paternal presence. They didn't learn that they're special. They learned that they're inadequate, but at the same time they were bombarded with impossible expectations, so they hide, minimize themselves, live in the shadows, but inside they carry the same hunger for validation, only ashamed, hidden, denied. It's fascinating to see how these dynamics combine in different ways in each person. Each narcissist has their own psychological archaeology, their own unique combination of wounds, their own path to the split. But the root cause is always the same. The early years, the mirroring, the failed construction of the self. Now, you might be wondering, why do some siblings in the same family develop narcissism and others don't? That's a crucial question. And the answer reveals something important about how these dynamics work. The truth is that parents treat different children in different ways, even without realizing it, even without wanting to. Each child occupies a different role in the parent's psyche. Each child activates different wounds. Each child receives a different type of mirroring. The firstborn frequently carries the greatest expectations. All the anxiety of new parents is projected onto them. He might receive excessive mirroring, conditional mirroring, or critical mirroring, depending on the family dynamics. The middle child is often the forgotten one. Neither the novelty of the firstborn, nor the tenderness reserved for the youngest. He may grow up with absent mirroring, with the sensation of being invisible. The youngest child is frequently overprotected or seen as the baby forever. He might receive distorted mirroring, being treated as less capable than he actually is. Or he might be the golden child, receiving excessive validation that the other siblings don't receive. Furthermore, the child's gender activates different dynamics. Boys and girls receive different mirroring from both mother and father. The expectations are different, the projected roles are different. And then there's the factor of the child's own temperament. Some children are more sensitive, more reactive, more affected by mirroring failures. Others are more resilient, managing to compensate in healthier ways. The combination of all these factors explains why the same family can produce a grandiose narcissist, a covert narcissist, and a relatively healthy person. The root causes are the same, but the manifestations are different. But wait, because there's an even deeper aspect that we need to explore. Carl Jung didn't see narcissism solely as an individual wound. He saw it as a collective phenomenon, an epidemic that spreads from generation to generation. Think about it. A mother who didn't receive adequate mirroring in her own childhood grows up with narcissistic wounds. She can't give her children what she never received, so her children grow up with the same wounds, which they'll pass on to their children, and so on, indefinitely. Carl Jung called this the generational transmission of complexes, and it's one of the most powerful and most invisible forces operating in human history. Think about your own family lineage. Go back 3 generations, 4, 5. How many wounds were passed on without ever being healed, How many splits happened? How many true selves were sacrificed? And this isn't just a metaphor, it's literally how culture is transmitted through micro moments of mirroring, through glances, through tones of voice, through presences and absences, things that aren't said, but are completely absorbed by the child's unconscious. And that's why the work of healing is so important, because it's not just about you. It's about breaking a cycle. It's about not passing on what you received. It's about being the generation that stops and resolves. There's something that Carl Jung called the familial unconscious, a kind of psychological field that permeates the family, where the unhealed wounds of one generation become the ghosts that haunt the next. You may have grown up without ever hearing a word about your great-grandmother's trauma, but that trauma is in you. In the way your family deals with emotions, in the way love is expressed or denied, in the way conflict is handled. And if you pay attention, you can perceive patterns that repeat generation after generation. Women who always choose emotionally unavailable men who can never express vulnerability. Families where certain emotions are completely forbidden. These patterns aren't coincidence. They are transmission. They are the root cause replicating through time. Now let's talk about how this root cause manifests in adult life. The adult who grew up with flawed mirroring carries the split into all their relationships, into their work, into their entire life. In love, they desperately seek what was lacking. They want a partner who will finally give them the mirroring that their parents didn't give, who will validate them unconditionally, who will fill the void. But this is a trap, because no partner can do the work that only you can do. No external relationship can heal an internal wound. And the search for this romantic savior will destroy relationship after relationship. The grandiose narcissist will drain their partners dry, will demand constant admiration, will discard them when the source of validation runs out, will move from relationship to relationship, seeking the perfect mirroring that they'll never find. The covert narcissist will sacrifice themselves in relationships, will give everything, expecting to receive in return the love that was missing, will completely erase themselves. And when the partner doesn't meet the impossible, unspoken expectations, they'll feel victimized, will resent in silence, will accumulate grievances until they explode or collapse. At work, the pattern repeats. The grandiose narcissist seeks power and recognition obsessively. They need to be the best, they need to be admired, they need to climb the ladder, and when they don't succeed, they feel narcissistic rage, envy, the desire to destroy whoever is above them. The covert narcissist works compulsively, hoping to be noticed, does everything right, never complains, but inside accumulates resentment for not being recognized, feels superior to colleagues, criticizes everyone in their thoughts, but never expresses anything directly. In both cases, work isn't a source of genuine fulfillment. It's just another arena for the search for mirroring, just another place to try to fill the void. And this incessant search has consequences: burnout, depression, anxiety, addictions, destroyed relationships, ruined careers, lives wasted pursuing something that can't be found where they're looking. Because the truth that the narcissist can't see is simple. What they seek outside can only be found inside. The mirroring that was missing needs to come from themselves. The true self that was buried needs to be unearthed. And that leads us to the most important question. Is it possible to heal? Carl Jung said yes, but the path is long and painful, and it demands something that the narcissist avoids at all costs. It demands looking inside, The first step is to recognize that there is a problem. This seems obvious, but it's the biggest obstacle. The narcissist doesn't see themselves as a narcissist. They see themselves as a victim, or as special, or as misunderstood. Anything but someone with a deep wound that needs healing. This recognition usually only comes through crisis, when all the relationships fail, when the career collapses, when the depression becomes unbearable, when there's nowhere left to run. The second step is to do psychological archaeology. Go back, investigate the childhood. Identify where the mirroring failed, where the split happened, where the true self was buried. This is the work of deep therapy, not surface coaching, not positive thinking, not affirmations in the mirror. It's descending to the root cause, to the original wound, to the moment when something inside of you died, so that you could survive. The third step is to grieve. Grieve for what you didn't receive. Grieve for the childhood that should have been. Grieve for the true self that was sacrificed, mourning the decades lived in a false self. This mourning is devastating. Many people avoid it because it seems unbearable, but it's necessary. You can't integrate what you can't mourn. You can't heal what you can't feel. The fourth step is reparenting, learning to give yourself what you lacked, learning to validate yourself internally, learning to look inward and find there the mirroring that you always sought outside. This means developing a loving internal voice, a voice that says, I see you, I accept you, you are real, you are worth it, you deserve to exist. Not because you achieved something, not because you performed well, but simply because you exist. The fifth step is integrating the shadow, bringing back the parts that were buried, the emotions that were forbidden, the aspects that were rejected. Everything that went into the shadow needs to be recognized, accepted, and reintegrated. Carl Jung called this process individuation, becoming whole, becoming who you really are, not the mask, not the persona, not the false self, but the complete being, with light and shadow, with strengths and weaknesses, with everything that makes you, you. This process isn't quick. It can take years. It can take a lifetime. But each step along the way brings more freedom, more authenticity, more capacity to love and be loved for real. Let me tell you about a woman who went through this process. Let's call her Sarah. She arrived in therapy at 38 years old, 2 divorces, a successful but empty career, chronic depression that no antidepressant could cure. She didn't see herself as a narcissist. She saw herself as a victim of bad husbands, of unfair bosses, of a life that never went right. But when she started investigating her childhood, something emerged. She remembered a mother who only praised her when she got perfect grades, a mother who became cold and distant when she failed at anything, a mother who never hugged her simply for existing. She remembered learning, very early on, that love was a transaction, that she was only worth something when she produced, when she performed, when she was perfect. And she spent 30 years living that, killing herself to be perfect, destroying herself when she failed, choosing partners who reproduced the same dynamic, seeking in work the validation that never came from home. Her healing process took 5 years, 5 years of deep therapy, of mourning, of anger, of confronting truths she preferred not to see, of learning to validate herself internally for the first time in her life. But when she emerged on the other side, she was another person, not better, not perfect, but whole, connected with herself, capable of loving without needing to be perfect, capable of existing without needing to perform. This is possible for her, for you, for anyone willing to do the work. And when you advance on this path, something extraordinary happens. You stop desperately needing the gaze of others. You stop seeking external validation obsessively. You stop living from the outside in because you found the internal source, the true self that was there all along, waiting, hidden in the shadow, ready to emerge when you were ready to look. This video exists because there are people committed to bringing to light what remains hidden in the shadows of the psyche. Investigating the root cause of narcissism isn't easy. It requires deep study of Carl Jung, of child development, of transgenerational family dynamics. The super thanks down below isn't just financial support. It's you actively participating in this work of illumination. When you click, you help other people who are on the same journey find this content. You become part of a movement of consciousness, of healing, of breaking cycles. If you've made it this far, something resonated. Maybe you recognized your own parents in what I described. Maybe you recognized yourself. Maybe you felt an emotion that you can't name. That's the true self calling, from the shadow, asking to be seen. Finally, the root cause of narcissism is in the early years, in the failures of mirroring, in the split that happens before words. But healing is possible. It's not easy. It's not quick, but it is possible. And it starts with a choice. The choice to look inward, to face the shadow, to do the work that no one else can do for you. That choice is yours, and it can start now. Comment down below what type of failed mirroring you recognize from your childhood: absent, distorted, conditional, inverted. Write one word that describes what was missing, because when you name it, you begin to integrate. And when you share, you show others that they aren't alone. The root was planted a long time ago, but you don't have to continue being defined by it. You can unearth the true self. You can heal the split. You can become whole. The work starts now, and the choice is yours.